Please follow me home, the little girl pleaded. The Mafia boss's response and what he chose to do after that shook the city. Rain sliced through the city like glass. Marco D'Angelo sat alone in a dark sedan, engine idling, one hand gripping the wheel. The other turned a gold ring on his finger. Over and over, the way men do when they're waiting for ghosts. He was waiting for a call that would never come. Then he saw her. A flash in the mirror. Small. Running. Bare feet slapping wet pavement, her little hands clutching something against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her alive. She stumbled. Caught herself.
Kept going.
Marco opened the door. Hey. His voice echoed off the concrete. Kid, where's your? She stopped right in front of him, chest heaving. Water streaked her face. Or maybe tears. He couldn't tell. Please. Her voice cracked. Please follow me home. He stared at her, confused, halfway to annoyed. Follow you? Do you know who you're talking to? She held out trembling hands. In them, a silver necklace glinted under the streetlight. Two halves of a heart, joined at the hinge. Marco's breath caught.
He knew that necklace.
He'd given it to his wife 15 years ago. The last time he saw it was the night she died. The girl's voice broke through his shock. They're coming for my mom. Please, you have to help her. Thunder rolled across the skyline. Marco knelt so he could look her in the eyes. What's your name? Mila. Mila, he repeated softly. Where's your mother? She pointed down the dark street. At home. She said if anything bad ever happened, I should find you. That sentence slid through him like a knife made of memory. Anna's sister had vanished years ago, disappeared into another city to escape the life he built. He hadn't seen her since the funeral. Could it be? He pushed the thought down and stood. All right, kid. Lead the way. They moved fast. Mila stayed ahead, flickering through the rain like something half-real. Marco followed, the weight in his chest growing heavier with every block. The neighborhood got worse as they went. Boarded windows. Broken lamps. Echoes of a city that had stopped caring. Mila darted into an alley and up a narrow staircase. The apartment door at the top hung half open. Marco whispered, Stay behind me. Inside, the air smelled like fear. A woman's voice called weakly from the other room. Mila? Is that you? The girl ran forward. Mom. Marco stepped into the light and froze. The woman on the sofa looked exactly like Anna. Same face. Same eyes. Only older. Sadder. She clutched a towel around her arm, stained dark with blood. She looked up. Gasped. Marco. For a moment, neither of them moved. Rain tapped the window like someone knocking gently on glass. He spoke first. Alina? She nodded. I didn't think you'd come. He gestured toward Mila. She came for me. Alina's voice broke. She remembered what I told her. Thank God. Marco's mind spun. Why does she have Anna's necklace? Alina's eyes filled with tears. Because it's hers. Anna's. She gave it to me the night before she died. She said if anything ever happened, I had to keep Mila safe. Her voice dropped to a whisper. She said you were too deep in that world, and they would use the child to destroy you. Marco felt the floor tilt. You're saying... She's your daughter, Marco. Silence swallowed the room. Mila looked up at them both, confused by the tears in their eyes. Marco knelt beside her. His hands shook as he brushed wet hair from her forehead. He could see Anna in her smile, in the curve of her nose. It was like looking at a ghost made real. A knock at the door shattered everything. Alina stiffened. They found us. Marco stood, instinct taking over. Who? Men from the old days, she whispered. The ones who blamed you for what happened to their boss. They followed me when I tried to hide. Another knock. Harder. Marco turned to Mila. Go to your room. Don't come out, no matter what you hear. She hesitated, then nodded and ran down the hallway. Alina gripped his sleeve. Please, don't let them take her. He looked into her eyes, Anna's eyes. I won't. The next minutes blurred. Voices rose outside. Demanding. Threatening. Marco answered through the door, his tone low but steady. Whatever he said made the voices fade back into the rain. When he turned, Alina was staring at him in disbelief. You just talked them down. I still have a few favors left, he said quietly. But they won't last long. She sank onto the sofa, shaking. All these years, hiding from your world, and it still found us. He wanted to apologize, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he sat across from her. What happened after Anna? He couldn't finish. Alina stared at the floor. She called me that night. Said she was meeting someone to end the fighting. I told her not to go. Her voice cracked. When the explosion happened, I thought it was over for all of us. But then I found Mila in the back room, crying, the necklace in her hand. Marco closed his eyes. He'd replayed that night 1,000 times. Hearing the truth didn't make it easier.
He opened them again.
You should have told me. You would have dragged her into that life, Alina snapped. She deserves better than blood money and bodyguards. He didn't argue. She was right. In the hallway, a small voice called out, Mom, can I come out now? Alina managed a smile. It's okay, honey. Mila peeked around the corner, still holding the necklace. Marco rose and walked toward her. Keep that safe, he said softly. It's from someone who loved you very much. She nodded solemnly. I know. Mom told me she was an angel now. His throat tightened.
Yeah.
She is. Thunder rolled again. Alina looked toward the window. They won't stop, will they? Not until they get what they want. And what's that? He met her gaze. Me. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Each second stretched longer than the last. Finally, Alina whispered, Then we run again. Marco shook his head.
No.
You've been running long enough. She frowned. What are you saying? I'll handle this. Her voice rose, frightened. You'll get yourself killed. He smiled faintly. Weary but certain. Not tonight. Outside, engines rumbled in the distance. Drawing closer, he turned back to Alina and Mila. Pack what you can. When I say go, you leave by the back stairwell. There's a safe place uptown. My driver will take you. Alina hesitated, but the look in his eyes told her he meant every word. As she hurried to gather a bag, Marco stepped to the window and watched headlights approach through the rain. For years he'd built a life of power and fear, thinking it would protect him. Now, looking at the shadow of the girl clutching her necklace, he realized what protection truly meant. He whispered to himself, barely audible over the storm. Not again. And with that promise echoing in his chest, he turned toward the door as the night pressed closer. The hallway was dim,
Narrow.
The stairwell bulb flickered, throwing long shadows across peeling paint. Marco stood there listening. Engines idled somewhere down the block, muffled by rain. Footsteps.
Distant.
Then silence. He drew a slow breath and pushed the door almost shut, leaving only a crack so he could watch the street below. Inside, Alina moved quietly, gathering clothes, a framed photo, Mila's worn stuffed bear. The girl hummed softly to herself, a tune that hit Marco in the chest. It was the same lullaby Anna used to sing. When Alina reappeared, her eyes were full of questions she didn't dare speak. Where will we go? There's an old friend uptown, Marco said. Owns a restaurant. He keeps a small apartment above it. You'll be safe there until I clean this up. Clean this up, she repeated, almost bitterly. You talk like it's as simple as sweeping a floor. Marco looked at her for a long moment. I don't know any other way to talk about it. She wanted to argue, but Mila tugged at her sleeve. Mom, are we leaving now?
Soon, Marco said gently.
First we wait. He checked his watch. Every tick echoed louder than it should. Finally, headlights swept across the window. A low horn sounded twice, short, deliberate.
That's him, Marco said.
They slipped out through the back stairwell, shoes splashing through puddles. A black car waited with its lights dimmed. The driver stepped out, a quiet man in a long coat. He nodded once to Marco. Take them where I said. The driver opened the door for Alina and Mila. The girl turned just before getting in, her small face pale in the light. Will you come later? Marco managed a faint smile. Count on it. The car pulled away into the storm. Only when its taillights disappeared did he turn back toward the alley. For a few seconds, the night was perfectly still. Then the hum of another engine broke through the rain. He knew that sound. Not the friend's car. This one was heavier.
Slower. A van.
He didn't run. He walked calmly back into the building, closed the door behind him, and switched off the light. Footsteps echoed outside. Voices. The storm swallowed the rest, leaving only the sound of his own breathing. In the dark, Marco thought of Anna, how she'd hated this life, how she'd begged him to walk away before it destroyed everything. And now, years later, her child was running through the same streets, hunted by ghosts he'd made. He felt something old shift inside him. Not anger. Something sharper. Resolve. 2 hours later, the rain eased. Marco arrived at the restaurant, a narrow brick place tucked between shuttered shops. The sign above the door still read Johnny's, though the paint had started to peel. Johnny himself stood behind the counter, wiping a glass. His eyebrows rose when Marco entered. You look like you've seen the devil. Maybe I have, Marco said. You got them? Johnny nodded toward the back. Upstairs. The little one fell asleep fast. The woman hasn't closed her eyes once. Marco climbed the narrow stairs. The apartment was small but warm. The faint smell of basil and old wood mixed in the air. Alina sat by the window, the necklace resting in her palm. She keeps asking if you're coming, she said quietly. I'm here now. She looked at him. For how long? He didn't answer. Instead, he moved to the window and looked down at the street. The city seemed calmer here, but he knew calm never lasted. Alina came to stand beside him. You don't have to fix this alone. Yes, he said softly. I do. She sighed. You always think you're the only one who can carry the weight. That's what broke Anna. The words hit him harder than she meant them to. He turned away, staring at the floor until the silence between them softened. Then a small voice from the corner. Are you mad, Mr. Marco? Mila had woken, rubbing her eyes. Her hair stuck out in every direction. He knelt beside her bed. No, sweetheart. Just thinking too much. She smiled sleepily. Mom says thinking too much makes your heart heavy. He chuckled quietly. She's right. She reached out her hand. Here. I'll share mine. Maybe it'll feel lighter. The innocence in her voice cut through everything else. He took her tiny hand in his. Thank you, he whispered. When she drifted back to sleep, Alina watched from the doorway. She doesn't understand what's happening. Good, he said. Let her keep it that way. Alina folded her arms. And when she asks why we can't go home? He looked at her, eyes tired but steady. Because home is something we build again. Away from all this. She didn't argue. For the first time that night, she seemed to believe he meant it. Morning came quietly. The storm had passed, leaving the streets washed clean. Johnny brought coffee upstairs. The van from last night was seen near the docks, he told Marco. But nobody's talking. Marco nodded. They're waiting for me to make the first move. Johnny frowned. You gonna? No. Not yet. Alina listened from the corner. Then what happens now? He looked toward the sleeping child. Now we disappear. For a while. Her brows knitted. You think they'll stop looking? No. But by the time they find us, I'll be ready. The way he said it made her shiver. There was no threat in his tone. Only certainty. He finished his coffee, set the cup down, and walked to the door. Where are you going? Alina asked. To make sure we have a future. She caught his arm. Don't vanish again, Marco. Not after she finally found you. He hesitated, then nodded once. I won't. Downstairs, Johnny followed him to the door. You sure about this? I have to clean my name, Marco said. And theirs. Johnny gave him a look that held both respect and worry. You always were a stubborn fool. Yeah, Marco said. But sometimes that's what saves you. He stepped into the sunlight, the city glinting wet around him. For the first time in years, The weight on his shoulders felt like purpose, not punishment. Back upstairs, Alina watched from the window as he walked away. Something inside her eased. A quiet faith she hadn't felt since the night her sister died. She turned toward Mila, still asleep, the necklace glinting on the bedside table. Alina picked it up and traced the curve of the broken heart. "I hope you know what you're doing, Marco," she whispered. "Because I can't lose her too." Outside, the city was waking. Vendors opening shutters. Buses hissing at the curbs. Ordinary life beginning again. But somewhere deep in that city, old grudges were stirring. Names whispered in phone calls. Eyes turned toward Johnny Street. And far from the window where Alina stood, Marco D'Angelo crossed into a part of town he hadn't seen in a decade, heading toward the place where all the ghosts lived. He didn't know exactly how he would make things right, only that he would. For Anna. For Alina. For the little girl who carried a necklace that had once belonged to love itself. And for the man he still hoped he could become. The sun had burned through the morning haze, but the city still smelled like rain. Marco walked the old streets, like a ghost retracing its own path. Every block carried a memory, a deal, a betrayal, a promise he never kept. But this time, he wasn't here to collect anything.
He was here to end something.
He turned into a narrow lane that opened into a forgotten courtyard. There, half collapsed under ivy and rust, stood an old warehouse, once the beating heart of his empire. Now, it was just another ruin filled with echoes. Marco paused at the entrance, hand resting on the cold metal door. His reflection stared back in the glass. Older, harder, but still alive. He pushed it open. The hinges groaned. Dust and silence welcomed him in. Inside, shafts of light pierced the dark from holes in the roof. The place smelled of oil, wood, and time. A single chair sat in the middle of the room. On it lay a small envelope with his name written across the front. He frowned, picked it up, and unfolded the paper inside. The handwriting was neat, careful. A woman's. "If you're reading this, it means you still care enough to come back. I don't know how far you've fallen, Marco. But remember, not every war needs bullets. Sometimes, peace is the hardest fight of all."
Anna.
His throat tightened. The letter was old, yellowed around the edges. She must have written it years before she died, maybe even knowing he'd only find it when he was ready. For a moment, he couldn't move. Then a sound cut through the stillness. A door creaking behind him. "Didn't think you'd ever come back here," a man's voice said. Marco turned slowly. In the doorway stood Vince, his former lieutenant, the man who'd once sworn loyalty and later vanished after Anna's death. "Vince," Marco said evenly, "you've been busy." Vince shrugged, a bitter smile playing on his lips. "Somebody had to keep the streets moving while you disappeared." Marco studied him. The years had carved lines into Vince's face, but the arrogance was still there. "You were the one who sent men to the apartment." Vince didn't bother denying it. "You took something that wasn't yours, Marco. You left a hole in the business. You think people just forget. I don't care about the business. That's the problem." Vince stepped closer, boots echoing. "You left us leaderless.
Weak.
And now you want to play hero, because some kid calls you daddy?" Marco's jaw tightened. "Watch what you say." Vince laughed. "Always the same. You talk about family, but the only thing that ever mattered to you is control." Marco didn't rise to it. He just looked tired. The kind of tired that comes after a lifetime of fighting the wrong battles. "I'm done with control," he said quietly. "I just want peace." Vince's eyes narrowed. "Peace doesn't pay debts." "Then consider mine paid," Marco said, turning toward the door. But Vince's voice stopped him. "You walk away now. I can't protect them." That word, them, hit like a bullet. Marco turned slowly. "What did you say?" Vince smiled thinly. "You think I don't know where they are? You were followed, old man. You led me right to them." For a heartbeat, the world went still. Then Marco took one step forward. His tone was calm, almost cold. "If you touch them, I'll—" "Relax," Vince said, raising a hand. "No one's getting hurt."
Yet.
but you know how leverage works. You come back, take your seat, things go back to normal. Everyone's happy. Marco stared at him. And for the first time, Vince saw something he hadn't seen before. Not rage. Not threat. Conviction. I'll never sit in that chair again, Marco said. Vince shook his head, disappointed. Then you're not leaving this place. Marco's lips curved slightly, almost like a smile. Maybe not. But neither are you. Before Vince could reply, the faint wail of sirens drifted in from the street. He turned toward the sound, frowning. What did you do? I told the truth, Marco said simply. About everything. Records, ledgers, names. They'll find it all in my office downtown. I burned my empire before you could touch it. Vince's face drained of color. You. Marco stepped past him, toward the light spilling through the open door. Walk away, Vince. It's over. Behind him, Vince's voice cracked with fury. You think you can erase what we built? Marco didn't look back. I'm not erasing it. I'm freeing it. He walked into the sunlight, the air sharp and clean after the storm. The sirens grew louder, rounding the corner. By the time they reached the warehouse, Vince was gone. Marco kept walking. Back at Johnny's restaurant, the world felt different. Quieter somehow. Alina sat at the small table, a cup of tea in her hands. Mila was drawing at the counter, crayons scattered everywhere. When Marco walked in, both of them looked up. Alina's eyes widened. You're back. He nodded. It's done. She searched his face for what that meant, but didn't ask. She didn't have to. Mila hopped off her stool and ran to him, arms outstretched. I knew you'd come back. He crouched to meet her hug, the smallest smile breaking across his face. Told you I would. She looked up at him, curious. Are we safe now? He hesitated, then brushed a strand of hair from her eyes. Safer than we were yesterday. Alina set her cup down. Does that mean we can stop running? Marco looked around the cozy space, the sunlight on the walls, the smell of bread baking downstairs, the sound of Mila's crayons scraping paper again. For now, he said softly, we build something better from here. Alina studied him. And if the past comes back? He met her gaze steadily. Then it'll find someone ready. She nodded, understanding more than he said. For a moment, the three of them just stood there. A strange, fragile family born out of loss and survival. Then Johnny came in, wiping flour off his hands. Lunch is ready, he said. And no arguments, you're all eating. Mila grinned. Can I have 2 slices? 3, Johnny said with a wink. For being brave. Laughter filled the small apartment. Hesitant at first, then real. It felt like sunlight breaking through clouds after too many years of rain. Marco sat at the table, the weight in his chest finally easing. He looked at Alina, who looked back with something gentler than anger. Maybe forgiveness. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of it. Outside, on a rooftop across the street, a single figure watched through binoculars. A phone buzzed in his pocket. A quiet voice spoke on the other end. Is it him? The watcher's jaw tightened.
Yeah.
He's alive. Good, the voice said. Keep it that way for now. The line went dead. The watcher slipped the phone away, eyes still fixed on the window where the faint sound of laughter drifted out into the afternoon. He sighed, lowering the binoculars. Guess peace never comes easy, boss. And with that, he disappeared into the maze of rooftops, leaving only the hum of the city behind. A city that never forgot, even when its people tried to. The days that followed were calm in a way Marco hadn't felt in years. Mornings began with the sound of Mila's laughter echoing down the narrow staircase. Evenings ended with the smell of Johnny's cooking drifting through the apartment. For the first time, life wasn't about strategy or power. It was about breathing again. He fixed broken shelves, helped Johnny at the restaurant, walked Mila to the corner bakery where she liked to count the pastries behind the glass. Each small act built something solid, something real. But in quiet moments, when the street outside grew still and the light faded from the windows, he could feel the weight of unseen eyes on him. The world he'd walked away from didn't forget easily. And he knew peace was only ever borrowed time. One evening, Alina found him sitting alone in the courtyard behind the restaurant. He was holding Anna's necklace, the one Mila now wore during the day, turning it slowly between his fingers. She looked so much like her today, he murmured, not looking up. Alina sat beside him. She has her smile. And your stubbornness. He smiled faintly. That's a dangerous combination. They sat in silence for a while. The air was cool, the cities hummed distant and soft. Finally, Alina said, "You've changed." "Maybe." "No," she said. "You have. I used to think you were just stone. That nothing touched you. But you came back for us. You didn't have to." He looked at her, eyes steady. "I did. Because Anna believed I could still be someone worth saving. And because I owed her daughter the man she thought I was." Alina's voice softened. "Maybe now you are." He chuckled quietly. "Don't give me too much credit. I'm still learning how to live like a normal man." "Then start with dinner," she said, rising and brushing off her hands. "Mila made you something. Pancakes, shaped like hearts. They're a disaster, but you'll eat them anyway." He smiled, following her inside. "That's an order I can follow." Later that night, after Mila had fallen asleep and the lights were low, Marco sat by the window watching the rain start again. He caught his own reflection, tired eyes, gray in his beard, but something else there too. Peace. Maybe even hope. His phone buzzed once on the table. A message from an unknown number. "You did the right thing. The city's quieter. Take care of the girl." He stared at it for a long moment before typing back a single word. "Always." He deleted the thread and turned the phone off. Behind him, Alina's voice came softly from the doorway. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," he said, for the first time in a long time. She nodded, trusting that answer. "Then get some sleep. Tomorrow's a new day." When she walked away, he looked once more at the sleeping child in the next room, her hand resting over the half-heart pendant. He whispered to himself, "Your mother would be proud." The words hung in the quiet until the rain swallowed them whole. Morning again. The sky cleared fast after the storm. Mila ran through the restaurant, chasing a paper boat she'd folded from Johnny's old menu. Her laughter filled every corner of the place. Johnny grumbled good-naturedly, pretending to be annoyed. "You're gonna make me old, little one." "You're already old," she teased. Marco laughed from the counter. "She's not wrong." Johnny threw a towel at him. "Says the man with more gray hair than me." Alina came down the stairs, smiling at the sight. For a moment, it felt like they'd all stepped into a life borrowed from another world. One without danger, without past sins. Then a car pulled up outside. A black sedan. Marco's smile faded. Johnny saw it too. "Friend of yours?" "Maybe," Marco said quietly. The door opened, and a man in a dark coat stepped in. His expression wasn't hostile, more respectful than wary. "Mr. D'Angelo," he said, removing his hat. "I was asked to deliver this." He handed Marco a sealed envelope. Marco didn't open it right away. "Who sent you?" The man hesitated. "Let's just say, someone who owes you their life. They said you'd understand." Marco studied him for a beat, then nodded. "Tell them I appreciate it." The man tipped his hat and left without another word. Alina approached slowly. "What is it?" Marco broke the seal and read the single line inside. "Debt's settled. The past is done. Live." He folded the note carefully and slipped it into his pocket. "What does it mean?" Alina asked again. "It means," he said, exhaling, "we're finally free." She watched him closely. "Do you believe that?" He looked at Mila, still playing on the floor. "I want to." Alina smiled. "Then maybe that's enough." Weeks passed. The world outside moved on, and the shadows that had once followed them grew faint, then disappeared. Mila started school. Alina found work helping Johnny with the restaurant's books. Marco began repairing old buildings in the neighborhood, quietly, anonymously, putting something good back into the city that had taken so much. People started greeting him on the street. Morning, Mr. D, they'd say. He'd nod.
Smile.
Keep walking. At night, when the streets glowed gold under the lamps, he would walk home with the sounds of laughter drifting from open windows and think, maybe this is what redemption looks like. One evening, he stopped at the riverbank, the same one where he'd once made 1,000 mistakes. The water shimmered under the city lights. He took Anna's half of the necklace from his pocket, kissed it gently, and dropped it into the current. Rest now, he whispered. We're safe. The pendant caught the light once before sinking out of sight. When he returned to the restaurant, Mila was waiting for him on the steps, holding something behind her back. What's that? He asked. She grinned and produced a small, unevenly wrapped gift. It's for you. He took it, smiling. Inside was a drawing, stick figures of 3 people holding hands, standing in front of a house. Above it, in big letters, she'd written, Our family. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Then he crouched and pulled her close. You know, he said quietly, I think you're the bravest person I've ever met. She giggled. Mom says I get that from you. He shook his head.
No.
I get it from you. Behind them, Alina leaned against the doorway, watching the two of them with a soft smile. The sun dipped behind the rooftops, washing the city in gold. For the first time in a lifetime, Marco D'Angelo wasn't looking over his shoulder. He wasn't chasing power or haunted by ghosts. He was just a man, a father, a brother, a survivor, sitting on a quiet street with the people who taught him that love was stronger than any empire he'd ever built. The wind carried the last of the day's warmth across the street as he said, half to himself, half to the fading sky. Sometimes the toughest men are the ones who learn to stay. And the city, always listening, seemed to nod in agreement as the lights came on one by one.
Soft. Steady. Alive.